What is up, guys? Welcome to another video on the Lazy Day NBA show. Today, we're looking at taking the power scaling method that I used for my two previous videos, looking at LeBron versus Michael Jordan. And I want to start building out an all-time list using that power scaling method. And so this will be the first, technically the second of a few iterations of head-to-head comparisons between two all-time great players. So today we're looking at Tim Duncan versus Shaq. And if you think you know who is higher all-time, in your opinion, put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you guys who you think is greater all-time. But without further ado, in these comparisons, I'm going to be going through some of these slides just explaining the argument. But if you've seen the last two videos, then you kind of already understand where I'm coming from. And so I'm going to try to go through them a little bit quick. But first of all, we're starting off by taking a look at basketball from a philosophical perspective using logic, meaning that we have our premises and then we have a conclusion. We're trying not to use any emotion when we are debating these people. There is such thing as the eye test, which I do talk about, but we try not to use bias or emotion when we're evaluating these people. And then down here, I just have two examples of how premises work, and how they lead to conclusions to show that if you disagree with the conclusion, that you have to first disagree with one of those premises, and then you have to break down that premise and explain why logically it's not sound. Okay, so first premise is era inflation. So we have a few of these key check marks through these milestones in the NBA organization's history that have changed the game. And this just kind of goes to build kind of a track record of why I believe era inflation is a thing. Next, we have all of our premises here. If you want to pause this and read this, it's, good information to know. But basically, the first premise is era inflation, which we already kind of talked about. And then we have that the conference MVP and finals MVP matter exponentially more than a ring. And then we also have that the medal system is far superior at showing context. The fourth, the medal system in the MVP race is necessary. If you refute this, you are accepting that the premise that MVP robberies never happen. And we lose a lot of context when these robberies do happen if you have this all or nothing mindset to where either you win the award or you don't. Okay, so five, your whole career does matter, better or for worse. And six, a bad season isn't a neutral event, so it should harm your legacy is more or less that premise. Next, we have some principles. The Steph Curry principle is the principle that we use to establish the point value for the unanimous MVP, which is the highest points because it's only been done once. There have been a few times in NBA history where someone came close. I believe LeBron has come close. I believe Shaq has come close. I'm sure Michael Jordan has come close. I'm not aware of which year that would have been that he would have come close. But I'm sure it's happened. But I know for LeBron it was 2013, and then for Shaq I can't remember which year, but I know that he did get pretty close to a unanimous MVP. Next, we have the Jordan Russell principle, and this principle is how we establish air inflation. And how steep that air inflation is. So the Jordan Russell principle is simply that if you played in the 60s, which is the base era, and you played in the 90s, that anything you do in the 90s is worth twice as much as something that you did in the 60s, which is why Jordan's 6 rings count more than Russell's 11 rings. Next, we have the Jordan Horry principle. So the Jordan, Kobe, and Barkley Horry principle are how we establish the point values for rings. So we know that Jordan has 6 finals MVPs. Robert Horry has 7 rings, but we know that Michael Jordan is greater. Moving on, Kobe only has 2 finals MVPs, and yet his 2 finals MVPs are still superior to Robert Horry's 7 rings. Barkley Barkley has what I call a pseudo conference MVP. Now, what is a pseudo conference MVP? So the conference MVP is an award that has not, it just came out these last 3, 4 years. Um, and so in order to compare everyone from today fairly with everyone in the past, more or less, I just go back and I look at those conference games and I look at the stats. I look at the basic stats and the advanced stats. And if that player would have won that MVP, we give it to them in a pseudo fashion. So that is the Barkley Horry principle that a pseudo conference MVP is greater than 7 rings. The robbery principle is that if you believe that robberies exist, that all or nothing rewards can't reflect true context, and so the medal system is superior at reflecting this. The lone wolf fallacy principle. This is the fallacy principle where people believe that a single person is responsible for all of the winnings. Most often used by people that think Michael Jordan is the GOAT. They attach all 6 rings and all 6 championships to they give all the responsibility and all the praise to Michael Jordan, when in reality, um, that praise should be split up between him, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr, you know, people that were on his team. And if you do not believe the lone wolf fallacy, then we have 3 premises here that establish this pattern. 2016 Steph Curry was a unanimous MVP. He had a 73-9 record and no ring. Um, 2009 LeBron had an MVP with a 20.3 win share and a .318 win share per 48 and lost in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Magics. If you're not familiar with 2009 LeBron, 2009 LeBron is one of the greatest NBA players of all time. Also, one of the greatest individual seasons of all time. So, if you're not familiar with that, I highly suggest you learn about it. Now, 1988 Michael Jordan is the year that Michael Jordan actually became Michael Jordan. A lot of people think that it was when he won his first ring. That is not true. 1988 was when he won his very first MVP. In 1988, he went 35, 5, 5, and 3 with a 21.2 total win share and a .308 win share per 48. And he lost to the Pistons in the second round. He didn't even make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, keep in mind that this is probably one of the greatest individual seasons that Michael Jordan has ever had. This is probably one of the best players in NBA history. Arguably, I would say that 1988 Michael Jordan was probably a top 3 best player ever. And he lost in the second round. So this completely eradicates this whole lone wolf fallacy that people have going on. Next, we have our power scaling method. Um, so once again, we use this 2x multiplier in order to establish that the 90s are worth more than double what the 60s are worth. And that is how we know that Jordan's 6 rings are greater than Bill Russell's 11. Um, Also, with that being said, um, these multipliers that I have here, the 2.2, 2.4, and 2.6, I personally actually kind of watered these down a little bit. I believe that these are not true indications of how much more skilled the league is today. If it was up to me, I would probably have like um, maybe 2.25, 2.5, 2.75, or maybe 2.5, 2.3, and then maybe 2 or something like that. Um, this is as watered down as it could get because in my previous video, I wanted to make a case for Michael Jordan to have the best shot against LeBron, even though he still lost in that comparison. But since we use these multipliers in that video, we're going to keep it throughout the entire series until I more or less fine tune, um, until I fine tune the power scaling even more. And then we'll probably run all these videos back in like um, or I'll just adjust them, off camera. Moving on. So we have our point values here. Not all of these point values are reflective in the principles, or the principles aren't all reflected in the points just yet. But like I said, these are the points that I use for Michael Jordan versus LeBron. So we're going to keep it consistent and use it for everybody else moving forward. Um, just some key points to look at here. We have if you win a ring, it's worth 30 points. If you're the actual MVP, it's worth a lot more. In fact, if you win a conference MVP, it's worth more than a ring. If you win a regular season MVP, it's worth more than a ring. Even if you place third in the MVP race, it is worth more than a ring, in my opinion. because once again, rings don't mean anything. The actual MVPs of that playoff run do matter a lot, and that's why we reward them. But the ring itself, to me, doesn't mean anything. Unanimous MVP is the highest, is the most skilled thing that you can do. And then we have our three-peat finals MVP. The reason why we don't have three-peat rings is because, once again, rings don't matter to me. However, if you get the finals MVP 3 times in a row, 3 years in a row, I do believe that that is close to, it is the second most difficult thing to do in the NBA, other than a unanimous MVP. And then we have Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, once again, runner up, and then third place. And then we have some of the negative things that can impact your career. If you get swept, if you have a losing record, first round exit, and then if you miss the playoffs. Okay, so starting off with Shaq. So Shaq in the 90s, um, other than having some insane highlights, it wasn't the most productive. Unfortunately, he just played with a lot of great competition, like Jordan, Stockton, Carmelo, Hakeem Olajuwon. There's a lot of people that were getting in his way. He lost in the finals against Hakeem Olajuwon when he was on the Magic. He lost in the conference finals twice. However, we're going to give him a conference MVP for that time that he did take the Magic to the finals. He was runner up MVP one time in the 90s. And that was the only time he showed up on the poll for at least the top three in the poll. I'm pretty sure he was. There's other years where he was on the poll, but he was not top three. He did win Rookie of the Year. He was never top three in Defensive Player of the Years in the 90s. He missed the playoffs once, and he had a first round exit once. And somehow, some way, this man got swept 5 times. Okay. Now, sometimes when I'm doing research on these videos, I learn new things. I did not know Shaq had been swept 5 times just in the 90s. Like, that's insane. And so, anyways, we have his point values here. We add everything up. We get 225 points minus all of his negative marks, which is 360 points. We get a negative 135 points, and we have our 2x multiplier because it's the 90s, and we get negative 270 points. So, unfortunately, the first era that he played in, it was not the greatest, although he did have some great highlights. Okay, so Shaq in the 2000s. So Shaq in the 2000s went to the finals 4 times, and won 4 times. He did lose in the finals one time. I think it was 2004. He won 2001, 2002, 2003, and then he won in 2006 with Dwayne Wade on the Heat. So, yep, that's his finals appearances. He did go to the conference finals one time and he lost. He was a three-peat finals MVP one time on the Lakers, and so we count that for him. He was finals MVP once again 3 times, conference MVP 3 times. And so this is where the bulk of Shaq's career is. This is like that three-peat run that he was on with the Lakers is where the bulk of his legacy lies. Um, he was a regular season MVP, I believe, in the year 2000. I think it was the 99 2000 season that he won the MVP. He was runner-up once, and then he placed third twice. So total, he's been in the top three 4 times in this era. He was runner-up for DPOY one time, and he missed the playoffs once. He had 2 first-round exits, and he got swept once. So far in his career, he's been swept 6 times. Crazy, crazy stuff. But like I said, that is not to overshadow the fact that he had four rings and a three-peat Finals MVP run. So when we tally up all his points, we have 1,020 points. We have to deduct 210 for all that negativity over there. Then we get 810 points that we have the 2000s multiplier 2.2 to get 1,782 points. Moving on to the tens. Now the tens, literally nothing happened because he only played 1 year. He played 2011 and then he retired that off season in 2011 with the Celtics. So literally nothing happens here. So with all that, his career, we get more or less 1,782 minus that 270 to get 1,512 points total for his entire career. So yeah, and also keep in mind, guys, that this power scaling is to talk about the GOAT debate. Shaq is still one of my favorite players to watch. Um, his highlights are insane, but unfortunately, once again, I can't. I'm not using bias to do these power scaling because I can't calculate how fun a person is to watch. Like that's not something that's calculatable or calculable. So on paper, this is his score. On highlights, he's one of the most fun players to watch ever. Okay. So Tim Duncan in the 90s, he won the finals one time with the Spurs. He stayed with the Spurs for his whole career, so it's always going to be with the Spurs. He never lost in the finals. He never lost in the conference finals. He had one Finals MVP with that with the Spurs. I counted that playoff run to give him the conference MVP. No regular season MVPs. He was never runner up. He was third place on the polling one time in the 90s. And then he won Rookie of the Year. He never shows up on the top three of the Defensive Player of the Year award. And he never had any missed playoffs, first round exits, losing records, or getting swept. So, all in all, his career in the 90s, we have 330 points times two. We get 660 points for Tim's career just in the 90s. Okay. Now, in the 2000s, we have three finals wins, one finals loss, or one finals conference finals loss, excuse me. Two finals MVPs. The 2007 run that they did, the finals MVP went to Tony Parker, not to him. And so, yeah. And then with that, we have three conference MVPs. I gave the conference MVP to him. Simply based on the stats, he did do more work in the conference finals, but then Tony Parker took over once they got to the finals. So he was MVP twice. He had runner-up MVP one time. Uh, he showed up on the Defensive Player of the Year top three twice in that third spot, and so we're gonna give that to him. He had two first-round exits, and he got swept one time. All in all, 910 points minus 150 points to get that 760 times 2.2 for that error inflation multiplier to get 1,672 points. Okay. Tim Duncan in the tens. So he retired in 2016. And so he still played for half of the era, a little bit more than. And so, he actually was able to, do a little bit. So he won the finals one time. He lost the finals one time. Um, and so he won against the Heat against LeBron one time, and then he lost against LeBron one time in the Heat. He lost in the conference finals one time. It was either against the Mavericks or against the Lakers. I can't remember, but yeah, there's that. He got one conference MVP, pseudo in a pseudo fashion. He never shows up on the MVP board, never shows up on the Defensive Player of the Year board. He had two first round exits and he got swept one time. So, all in all, he got 160 positive points minus 150 negative points to get 10 points. And then we times that to the 2.4x multiplier to get 24 points. So, unfortunately, his legacy in the tens really um, doesn't show up on paper. Although I want people to understand that the finals run that he did with that Spurs team was arguably one of the greatest teams ever. With him, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard, that was easily one of the greatest teams ever. And so I highly recommend people learn more about that team specifically, even though it doesn't show up on Tim Duncan's legacy on paper, or at least in this power scaling comparison. It was phenomenal. So, with that being said, Tim Duncan's career, we have the 90s, 660 points. We have the 2000s, 1,672 points. We have the 10s, 24 points to get 2,356 points. So, with that being said, who's the winner? Shaq has 1,512 points. Tim Duncan has 2,356 points. I forgot to remove this picture from the last, but excuse that. LeBron is still the GOAT. So, all-time list. This is our all-time list. And this actually really does put into perspective LeBron and Michael Jordan. when you see the power scaling next to Shaq and Tim Duncan, Shaq and Tim Duncan are not even close. They're just not even close. I mean, LeBron's legacy alone is four times what Shaq's is. Shaq is still phenomenal, and Shaq would still dog on any other person that like put in this power comparison, except for, these three people. But in comparison to LeBron, I mean, like it's insane. Also Michael Jordan too. I mean, being above 4,000 points in this comparison, it looked easy on the first video because they both did it. But now when we're comparing the two people who I thought were going to be my three and my four on my all-time list, and they're not even close. And so now I'm kind of curious. In the next video, I'm gonna be doing Kareem and Bill Russell, and then I also want to get one with Kobe and Wade, and then I'm gonna get a few other people. But this all-time list is interesting. And after I do Kareem and Russell, I do think Kareem will get close to this second spot. I do think that Kareem will overtake Tim Duncan for the third place spot. But yeah, with all that, unfortunately for Shaq, even Tim Duncan's career in the 2000s alone overshadows his whole career. Which once again, like I'm not doing this um to dunk on Shaq at all. Like he's still phenomenal, and I still don't think that even after I do a few of these videos with Kareem, Russell, Kobe, Magic, like after I'm gonna put Bird in here, like I'm gonna get some other people in here. I still think that Shaq will be in the top five. So yeah. With that being said, that's it for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you agree, disagree with anything. Other than that, thank you for watching and peace.